Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do, the podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. And we've been talking about, the beginnings of reform and mental health treatment, and we're going to take back up on that. The Age of Enlightenment saw a number of radical changes in people's beliefs. Thank goodness. Old superstitions were replaced with a spirit of scientific inquiry, and the result was a better understanding of how the body functions. So finally, once we got out of the Dark Ages, people were going back to the science, of the older, civilizations, Greece and Rome and things. Rome, it was not quite as enlightened as Greece, as we know, but, thankfully for most people, this, new Age of Enlightenment bettered things for most of us. There was a return to a more rational view of psychopathology, and a sense of humanitarianism emerged. Because people were starting to realize this is a problem. This is not these people are bad or whatever else. This is an actual problem, and we need to deal with it. And they are our fellow human beings. We're all human beings. We're all in the same boat. So when you start singling people out for any reason, really, that's judgmental of you. And my grandma said one day, when you're pointing at somebody else, there's three fingers pointing back at you. And I've heard that before. And that's true. So if you're being judgmental, that is a reflection on you, not the other folks. Reforms in treatment soon followed, both in Europe and in the New World. And I'm just going to say, with the New World label, I'm going to disagree with that, because it wasn't a new world. The New World was not discovered. It was taken. When Christopher Columbus came, sailed the blue in 1492, there were millions of people already in North and South America. They were already there. You can't discover something that's already there. So, basically, the Europeans planted their flag and said this was theirs, but there were millions of people already living here. All of Native America from Alaska down to the very tip of South America was already inhabited. So, the history books might be kind of conning you on that one, because the New World was not new. It'd been here just as long as the old one. Reforms in Europe. One of the most important figures in the European reform movement was Philippe Pinel, a French physician. He decided to devote his life to the study and treatment of insanity after the death of one of his friends, who, after going mad, and that's their word, mad, had run into the woods and was killed by wild animals. So terminology's changed throughout the world, and in, the 1700s, mad was the term. In 1792, in the middle of the French Revolution, he was appointed director of La Bicetière, a mental hospital in Paris. He took the unprecedented and initially unpopular, and let's face it, anything new is unpopular. People like the status quo. People's brains like the homeostasis. They like the status quo. So anything new is unpopular until it then becomes popular. And then everybody wants to do it or see it or, know about it or whatever. He took the step of unchaining the patients. And, you can imagine some people were like, oh, no, bad move, don't do that. Some of whom had not been out of their cells for more than 30 years. He also did away with such violent treatment methods as bleeding, purging, and blistering. That's terrible that people were subjected to that then. Instead, he insisted upon humane and moral treatments. So good for him, which simply involved rest, proper food, a regular routine, and kind care. That's what all of us deserve, isn't it? Not even just mental patients. All of this sounds like Hippocrates' suggestions, Quite ordinary, but it was revolutionary for Pinnell's time, because nobody else was saying that. People were being locked up for the rest of their life. Not surprisingly, just being unchained wrought positive effects on the patients, many of whom wept with joy. Because, I mean, they are human beings. Mentally ill people are human beings. And some people want to forget that and say, oh, yeah, point fingers, and make fun of people and all kinds of crazy stuff. But it's like, no, we're all in this boat together. We're all human beings. Put a little love in your heart, as the song goes, and have some compassion and understanding for your fellow man, rather than, be judgmental and point your fingers at them. So, Instead, he insisted upon humane and moral treatments, which simply involved rest, proper food, a regular routine, and kind care. All of this sounds like his suggestions, but they were revolutionary for the time. I think we said that. Not surprisingly, just being unchained brought positive effects. Pinnell's reforms were then instituted with equally satisfying results at other French hospitals, such as La Salpêtrière. John Equirol, Pinnell's colleague and successor, continued Pinnell's work and was able to establish 10 new hospitals in France for the care of mental patients. So there's your really first big major step in treating mental illness. Was in, the late 1700s when they started making these hospitals for mentally ill patients. This made France the center of humane and moral treatment in the Western world. Similar developments were occurring in England, where William Tuke, an English Quaker, founded the York Retreat. This hospital for the mentally disturbed was based, on the Quaker principles of human kindness and respect. And everyone deserves that. The work of Tuke and his son, Henry, was greatly aided by the reports from France of the success of Pinnell and Esquirol. England thus joined France in improving the care of the mentally disturbed and implementing the disease model by turning the asylums into hospitals. For instance, in 1841, trained nurses were used for the first time in Gloucester Asylum, further cementing the idea that these were indeed hospitals, not prisons. The Geel community in Belgium also deserves mention. This was not a new idea. Geel had existed as a shrine for the mentally disturbed ever since the 13th century. Thousands visited it yearly, hoping to be cured. Many pilgrims were taken into the homes of local families for the duration of their stay, a custom that gradually expanded. As people grew less fearful about the disturbed, more and more pilgrims ended up staying and living with the people who had taken them in. And wouldn't that be great if everyone felt like that? I mean, here, even in my city and in different places I work, there's still a pretty big stigma about mentally ill people. I've heard people say some crazy stuff that it's like would have never even occurred to me that, you would think this about a person. But there are still people who feel that way. And that's a dang shame. So, Geel, Belgium, you can actually Google it. It's still a thing over there. Everybody's different. So just because someone has a mental illness doesn't make them defective or, cast out of society or someone to avoid or whatever. Like I said, put a little love in your heart, try to be a little compassionate and understanding of others' situations. Thus, normal and abnormal live peacefully together, each group benefiting from the other's presence. What is most remarkable is that the Geel colony is still thriving today, a fact that merits much more acclaim than it has received. And like I said, you can Google it. They're still doing that over in Geel, Belgium. Reforms in America. The reform movement swept the New World as well, and like I said, I don't even like that term New World. It was there before the Europeans discovered it. It wasn't new. One of the truly extraordinary figures in the American movement was Benjamin Rush, a well-known physician. He was also a signer of the Declaration of Independence, a delegate to the Continental Congress, the Surgeon General of Washington's Army, a treasurer of the U.S. Mint, founder of the first free medical clinic in the United States, and the author of the first American psychiatric textbook, Medical Inquiries and Observations upon Diseases of the Mind, published in 1812. Rush used leeches to bleed patients, so he wasn't quite as enlightened, as we are now. I think bleeding people with leeches has probably been done away with totally, except for maybe in the very fringes of society. Believing that abnormal behavior resulted from a blood overload in the brain. So again, even though they were becoming much more enlightened in the 1800s, they still didn't quite understand what caused mental illness. Caused by overexcitement. Again, it's not really a thing. Stress, anxiety, depression, but overexcitement, probably not a thing. He also developed a method called tranquilizing, and it's nothing like the tranquilizers we have today, which involves strapping patients into a strange device and then plunging them into ice-cold water. So, again, that's a little bit like torture. Both of these interventions were intended to reduce the flow of blood to the brain, not to harm the patients, but I guarantee you it did. But that's what they believed in the early 1800s. So, as part of his treatment, Rush advocated a considerate and humane attitude toward the disturbed. So at least he did that. He believed that proper nutrition was essential and even encouraged the hospital staff to bring fruits and sweets to the patients. He insisted on hiring only compassionate and intelligent staff members who would be able to converse with patients, read to them, and participate in their activities. A set of injunctions that also holds for today's mental health personnel. And, that's true. If you go to work at a mental health hospital or an office, psychiatrist offices, more than likely you're going to be psych tested. They're going to psych test you, which includes an IQ test and things like that. I was working at an office and I got psych tested. The psychologist who tested me said I was fairly well adjusted considering all I've lived through. So I took that as a compliment. But there were questions about stuff and people. And so the small office, they would implement this like other offices had. And so they did that. And I was glad to know that I wasn't crazy. So, because there's some people in my family who, disagree with that, but they're wrong. So, ha. Go back to childhood, me. But, clearly, Rush's title as the father of American psychiatry is well deserved. Even though he wasn't quite on the right track yet, he did have humane treatment methods, for the most part. But, leeches and dunking people in cold water, not so humane. But, he thought he was doing the right thing. Another important figure in the reform movement was Dorothea Dix. And I love this woman. I think she's awesome. I look up to her. Who spent her early adulthood as an unheralded Boston school teacher. She was forced to retire early because of illness, and in 1841 began teaching Sunday school in jails, poorhouses, and asylums. In 1848, she submitted a petition to Congress stating that she had seen almost 10,000 people, primarily mentally disturbed and retarded adults. They were bound with galling chains, bowed beneath fetters and heavy iron balls, attached to drag chains, lacerated with ropes, scourged with rods, and terrified beneath storms of excretion and cruel blows. Now subject to jibes and scorn and torturing tricks, now abandoned to the most outrageous violations. So, the humane treatment didn't carry over into the mid and late 1800s, unfortunately. Like I said, if you ever watched one of those movies about the late 1800s, there were asylums where folks were not being treated so very well. For 4 decades, Dick single-mindedly campaigned in the United States, Canada, and England for the humane management of mental patients. She spoke before most of the state legislatures, convincing some 15 states, as well as Canada and Scotland, of the need to build and staff more suitable institutions for the mentally disturbed. So, like I said, I love her. I think she was great, that she bothered to do that, because there were so many people today who, just whack them away, it's like they talk about these old houses with the attic, the disappointment rooms up in attics, where if any child was, mentally disturbed, retarded, deformed, they went to live up in there so that they weren't seen in polite society, which is so funny to me, because how impolite can you get to relegate someone up, to a room because you don't want people to see them? I mean, that's the height of impoliteness. Considering the times and the apathy of most politicians to such an issue, her success is astounding. And then unfortunately, nowadays we have a lot of politicians that have apathy to any issue that doesn't personally affect them. And that's a shame, because like I say, we're all humans, we're all in this boat together. She is personally credited with initiating the construction of 32 mental hospitals. So that is quite, the feat, and, good on Dorothea Dix, I say. A great heroine of the war against inhumanity, superstition, and that's what a lot of labels are, superstition, and ignorance. That plays a part too. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of ignorance in the world today. It's a dang shame. I don't know why people don't get educated and figure out stuff for themselves, and just believe whatever's put out there to them, because ignorance abounds nowadays. She was honored in 1901 by the U.S. Congress. So she was honored for her work, in helping mental patients get humane treatment, and to, open up more mental hospitals so that these people could get humane treatment. So, that's where I'm going to leave you for today. I hope that helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Excuse me. Please like and share this educational program. And that's what this is, an educational program. It's not meant to diagnose or treat any mental illness. Excuse me. If you were triggered by, or you feel like anything I talked about was an issue in your life, then by all means go and talk to your mental health professional. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. The links to that is in my posts. So thanks for watching or listening. That's all for now. Until next time.